Victor Salamba this wonderful Friday, the 27th of November, dear listener. As always, I'm glad to be on air with you every single time that I get the chance to be here. And I like beginning the show by giving thanks to God for His goodness, for His presence in our lives. I always say in Thanksgiving, dear listener, we give ourselves the chance to grow and the chance also to increase. And today, as we begin our morning reflection, I'm picking up where I left off last week. And I thank you so much for the feedback that I've received from last week's reflection that I got on my Facebook page, Victor Salamba. Thank you so much for all the feedback that I was able to get. And today, I'm actually moving to the next set of children, which is the middle children. Then I said that next week I will deal with the last bones. Next week I will deal with the last bones because I'm dealing with the last bones last because in the last bones category, I'll combine the only child and the last born because also if you deal with the firstborn, also you combine an only child in the same. And remember when I began last week, I said that there is no birth placement that is perfect or better than the other. It's just that they're all different because every one of us is unique. But also I said this. I said that we are influenced greatly by where we are. I said, of course, it's not absolute. Some children may act differently, yet they're in a particular place. It may be different from one child to the next. So at times also it might not be an absolute. So don't also assume that I'm trying to fit someone into a particular box and tell them that this is how you must or you ought to behave. But actually, is to bring a better understanding of who you are, a better understanding of the person who's in your life. But you may understand your children better, you may understand your spouse better, you may understand how you parent, you might understand how you are parented as well, because by understanding the birth placement, it kind of gives me a rough picture. But I said again, it can be also the fact that you are maybe a type A of that particular trait. Last week I talked about firstborns, and I said that what I'll talk about will tackle the type A firstborn. You know, the firstborns who fall within the parameters of what I talked about. They're those who did not, absolutely. So today we jump into talking about middle children. Now I begin by defining something. I begin by defining who is a middle child. Who is a middle child? Because let's not assume that every child is a middle child. No. Who is a middle child? I used the definition I used last week to define a firstborn. A middle child is a child who is in between two children, is in between two other siblings, but the age difference between the two, the one above him or her and the one below him or her, is less than 5 years. That is a middle child. If a child has two siblings if the child is in between two siblings and there's a gap of over 5 years between one and the other, then that disqualifies them as middle children, because that plays a huge role in their formation and in their psychological upbringing, you know, and their psychological development. So you find that a child can be a middle child, yes, they are your fourth born in a family of 6, but because the gap between this child and the last born is 6 years, then automatically you're no longer dealing with a middle child. This child might not portray middle child characteristics. They are likely to portray more of last-born traits. They are likely to develop more of last-born traits. If the gap is 5 years and more downwards, they are developing last-born traits. So they can either be a last-born extreme positive or extreme negative. I'll talk about that next week. If the gap is 5 years upwards, then they may develop first-born tendencies. That's why you can find a middle child in a family behaving like a first-born. If you look clearly, it's normally the age gap that actually plays a very huge part. Now, with that in mind, we'll be diving quickly just to begin to have a discussion and look at what makes a middle child and how do you relate with one. Hey, this way is very interesting. Number one, understand this, that middle children are arguably the most confusing set of children you'll ever have. They suffer one of the greatest character contradictions you can ever find. In that you can find that a middle child, when I talk about contradictions, number one is that a middle child can be a loner, they can be quiet, they can be shy. But also on the same line, the same middle child who is quiet, shy, being by themselves, on another day, on a different day, they're the most social, most friendly, and most outgoing human being. In fact, finding if the middle child is an introvert or an extrovert is tricky, because of this character contradiction. You know, they can be impatient, frustrated very quickly if things don't go their way, but also they are the most patient human beings you'll find. So it's important to understand first things first about them is that the personality of a middle child can contradict. It can confuse you. There are days they are alone, they want to be alone, they don't want to talk, they are quiet, and there are days they are laughing, they're talking to everyone, they're making friends. There are days they'll avoid conflicts, and the day middle children will actually go for it. They'll be aggressive, they'll go for it. There are days they'll choose not to be competitive, and there are days they'll choose to be very competitive. So you must understand that, number one, a middle child, depending on where they are and how they are, they have a character contradiction. There are days they are hot, there are days they are cold. There are days they are hot, and there are days that they are cold. Number two thing you must note about a middle child is this, is that they are generally peacemakers. Middle children are generally peacemakers. A middle child will choose peace rather than go to war. Their first instinct always is to pursue peace. And at times a middle child will pursue peace to their own detriment. They'll pursue peace to their own detriment. Because of this, they always have to find a way to find peace. A middle child wants to maintain peace. So at times, unless they are pushed to the wall, they'll seek peace as their first option. Even if they are unhappy. Even if the peace makes them unhappy, they will choose peace. Number three, this is very interesting now. Middle children are the most secretive human beings God made. If you want a secret to be kept, tell a middle child. Because even them themselves, they have secrets. It's difficult for a middle child to open up and tell you how they feel. Those of you who are married to some, you find that they can actually not say what they feel. A firstborn will say point blank, I'm not happy. A middle child will choose to ignore. And they are hurting quietly. But a middle child will choose to suffer silently. Why? Because also of the reason before. I said, for the sake of peace. So they might never actually really tell you what they feel. So they are secretive about how they feel, and they can keep your secrets too. They can keep your secrets too. So if you're married to one, you'd realize that there are many times you might express yourself. In fact, whenever I find marriages coming in, firstborns and middle children, the firstborn is the one who talks in the office and says, Victor, or my wife, or my husband, they'll go on and on and on. The middle child will be like, yeah, what my partner said is true. And they'll keep quiet at that. And unless you really probe to understand them, they never really say what is happening in them. They are very, very secretive. Number four, middle children can easily keep grudges. Among all people you'll meet, middle children are the grudge carriers. Middle children are the grudge carriers. Lastborns forget. Firstborns will fight with you and it ends. A middle child will keep it in their heart. They will not tell you offended me. They will not tell you hurt me. They will not tell you what happened. In fact, middle children can give you a false sense of peace. You might think you're okay with them, yet you're not okay. Alikasirika vile ulimfanya 1932. A firstborn will fire on sight. You know? A lastborn will show emotions. They'll cry, they'll do whatever they do, they'll tackle it, it'll end. A middle child can choose to keep it for the sake of peace. And they can choose to be a martyr about it and keep quiet. Yet they're keeping a very, very, very strong grudge with you, dear listener. So it's important to note these 4 points. When I come back from the break, I'll be able to share with you the other 6 points. I've just mentioned 4. After I come back from the break, I'll be able to share with you the remaining on how to relate with a middle child. Dear listener, walking with you, dear listener, talking about relating to middle children. Relating to middle children. I said this is a continuation of last week when I talked about relating to firstborns, and I saw a lot of feedback on my Facebook page, Victor Salamba. You can visit my page right now, Victor Salamba, on Facebook, just to find the reflection I did last week on the same. And also you can just drop your question and your comments there, and I'll be glad to respond to you. Now I move on to the next thing about middle children that is very, very interesting as well. That middle children can be rebellious. middle children can be rebellious. This is very interesting because in their quest for peace, actually, you might think that they will be the most cooperative. But actually, middle children can be rebellious. And here I mean silently rebellious. Silently rebellious. Whereby they can choose to go their own way, do their own things in their own way. Because they always like to do things, they always like to prove that they're different. So a middle child is highly likely to be rebellious. In a marriage, you'll find them, they struggle, at times, and they'll fight back, they'll push back. They might not say it in words, but they might fail to do what you've agreed. They might fail to agree with something that might even help the family because they are actually silently rebellious, or at times I'd like to say even openly rebellious. This is because they want to do things differently. They want to do things differently and they want to take risks. They want to do things differently and they want to take risks. So in their quest to want to do things differently, a middle child is likely to be rebellious even in a relationship. You might want to sit down on budget and they'll come up with their own way of doing things. They always believe that they have to be different. This is attached, of course, or attached to the fact that they were surrounded by many people and they were not able to stand out. So they believe that if I do things a different way, then I'll stand out. Then I'll be able to stand out. Which leads me to my next point, which is that middle children get very offended and they take it very personally when two things happen. Number one, if you undermine their opinion. And number two, if you don't ask for their opinion. I say that again. Undermining their opinions or shooting down their opinions. Or not even asking them, what do you think? If you're a parent, you have middle children, ensure you ask them one by one. Especially when you're in a family now, 2020, it's more likely to have a family like that, where you have a well-defined middle child, whereby you have 3 children, firstborn, middle, and last. Always ensure you ask them what is their opinion. If you're married to a middle child, ask them, what is your opinion in this matter? If they give you an idea, don't shoot it down. Middle children take it more personally than any other age group, than any other child in the family, sorry. If at all the ideas are shot down. They want to be asked, what do you think? They want to be asked, how do you feel? They want to be asked such questions in a way that they can explain them. If you want to, and that's why you find that a marriage between a firstborn and a middle child, that is the biggest point of contention. Especially when the firstborn is a lady and the middle child and the man is the middle child. You'll hear the man saying every so often that she treats me like a child, or she doesn't like to hear what I say. It's because the firstborn, due to their nature, firstborn will push the agenda very fast, and they'll push, and the middle child will want their opinion to flow, but the firstborn did not ask, or the firstborn shot down the middle child's idea, and this by itself begins, dear listener, to bring a lot of tension. The next point about middle children is that they are very loyal. They are very loyal. They are the people who keep friends for a long time. Middle children are relationship based. They keep friends for a long time. Oh, they keep friends for a long time. And the problem is that because they are more loyal to the friendship, they might actually fail to say what hurts them in the relationship. And that's what I said earlier on, that a middle child can give you a false sense of peace. They are loyal. They'll be loyal to the marriage. They'll be loyal to their spouse. Middle children are loyal, yes. The problem is that their loyalty comes at a price, and the price is this. They will not tell you what they feel. They won't tell you where the problem is in the relationship. They will keep quiet that the relationship may be able to continue. But dear listeners, I go back to say they are very, very loyal. They always feel very, very drawn. This is the next point. They feel drawn to people. They feel drawn to people who appreciate and notice them. Who appreciate and notice them. A middle child will buy a shoe because the person selling them the shoe noticed them. They will not even ask questions. They might not even do due diligence because there was a relationship with the one who was selling to them. If you show a middle child appreciation, attention, and you notice them, that, dear listener, is enough to build a relationship. They can buy a house from you. which is unlike other children. A firstborn will do due diligence. A middle child will buy it based on friendship, because the shopkeeper called him by name or called her by name, or because the person noticed them and picked them out of a crowd. That one is game over. That one automatically, dear listener, it is game over. And which is a very interesting thing. The next point is this: middle children will pursue independence and freedom quickly than all other children. They'll pursue independence and freedom quickly than any other children. It is easy in a family for a firstborn not to move out, for a lastborn not to move out, but for a middle child to move out. Middle children move out faster. They pursue independence faster because they're wired that way. Because they are not being noticed, they look for a life independent of the others. They want to shine by themselves. So they'll quickly ignore the others, dear listener. And my last point is this: middle children are not spoiled. Middle children are not spoiled. Translation is this: middle children will always have the most realistic expectations. They are the most realistic human beings you'll ever meet. They don't overshoot, they don't undershoot, because they never got the privilege of being spoiled. Most of them were never spoiled. Not all, I'm saying most of them were never spoiled. And because they were never spoiled, they compromise very quickly, and they're very realistic in their targets, in their relationships, in everything they do. They're very realistic. They don't have experience that blow out of the water. No. They are realistic. They don't want to be spoiled, because they were never spoiled. So they don't expect very huge things. That's why it's easy for them to take whatever comes. And that's why a middle child and a firstborn will clash, because a firstborn does not take whatever comes. A firstborn wants things in a particular way. A middle child will take whatever comes. They are realistic. Sema okay, ni sawa tu. Hakuna lunch, ni sawa. Hata sikuwa na expect. You know? A firstborn will complain and say, no, I expected lunch. A middle child will be like, okay, sawa. So time you can actually go with the flow, because they are realistic. Because they were never spoiled. Dear listener, as I said earlier on yesterday, last week on Friday, that these, dear listener, are just things to indicate to us how we are. There's no birth placement that is perfect or more superior than the other, and there is none, dear listener, that is inferior to the other. Again, not all of us fit in all this, but I said it will help us understand each other. It will help you understand something. That a marriage between a firstborn and a middle child are likely to fight over what? And why is it that you fight with your partner? You know, it'll help you know your children as well. If you're parenting a middle child, you must know they might never tell you how they feel. They might be the children in the house who'll express themselves the least, unless you pull them aside and talk to them on one-on-one. So it's important to understand that this doesn't put anyone in a box, but it will help us understand that, fine, as a middle child, this is how I am. As a firstborn, this is how I am.